Hello, everybody, and welcome to Some Patches Required, a show where we hope to educate and entertain you on the ever-turbulent games industry. I'm one of your hosts, Zach.
And I am your other host, Aaron.
And today, we've got another music-related guest. I don't kind of know why that happened, but, you know, we're never sad because I'm not very musically talented. In fact, I'd say it's audio witchcraft. So always excited to learn more and more about music and how it interacts with games. So we've got Alex Malcom from Warner Music, who is one of my friends I've known for quite some time. And he'll be talking with us today about what he does in music licensing. And I think once you listen to the recording, you'll see exactly what I mean about kind of my lack of knowledge. And I think it's fair to say, Aaron, is a pretty new topic for both of us.
Yeah. It was one of those conversations that I really quite enjoy having, because you don't normally think about music licensing. When you think about music in games, you're probably picturing, like, I'm not sure you could picture music, but you're probably thinking about, like, oh, this is the incredible writer behind the Assassin's Creed theme from AC2, or, you know, Bear McCreary or something like that. And it was a fascinating little conversation with Alex about what goes on behind the scenes, how music makes its way into games, how it gets licensed. A lot about it actually ended up relating to our content, our conversation around user-generated content, which I wasn't expecting that crossover for some reason, which again proves that I'm a neophyte in this space. It's an interesting peek into one of the lesser known aspects of game development, and I found it fascinating, and I hope that you do too. But before we get to that particular conversation, we would be remiss not to thank all of the returning listeners, especially if you've caught our other episode about music. As well as our new listeners. If you found us recently, thank you so much. If anyone would not mind to terribly throwing us a like, a comment, subscribing to us on your podcatcher of choice, or leaving us, dare I hope, a positive review on any particular platform, that's always a huge help, getting a couple more ears on the podcast and all that fun stuff. So that'd be much appreciated if you got the time and the inclination.
Yes, no, I definitely agree. And so that we don't take up too much of your time, let's hit that magical transition.
Here we go.
Hey, everybody. As promised, I've got my buddy Alex on the line from Warner Music Group. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Zach. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. You know what I just realized? I don't think a lot of people ask me back when we do that initial part. I expect it just to go directly into, like, hey, yeah, no, I'm Alex. I'm doing okay. This is what I do. But I appreciate you caring about my life.
At least one of us has to.
Yeah, no. I get neglected by Aaron emotionally on a daily basis.
Oh yeah, no, I don't care. Never have.
Well, before we talk more about emotional abuse, which of course is what we'll be talking about today, we pulled you on to talk about that, Alex. Definitely not music-related things. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on your role at Warner Music Group and what it is that you do?
Sure. So my formal title would be considered Global Music Sync for Warner Music Group. Mainly, I guess specifically the Warner Music Group is referring to our recorded music. I can go into that breakdown of what establishes publishing versus master recordings, but that's a different conversation. So primarily we're working with the artists and the managers at the label side on the actual sound recording that you would hear played on the radio, released on a CD, put on a vinyl, and so forth. So the publishing side obviously covers writers, and then we're handling label management stuff. But my job is working on music clearance, so that's actually getting approvals in order to put things into productions. And also, we have a creative side which works on pitching those materials to, let's say, music supervisors or studios, production houses, and so forth.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of like hunting then. If you find or know about a project that you think some of the music that's, you know, in your label would be good for, you can approach them and say like, hey, I think you should use X because I think this would really improve your, you know, whatever. In your case, a lot of the stuff you do is video games. We'll get into that. But
Sure.
that's an actual like component of what Warner Music Group does. I guess I always just think with like a lot of that stuff that so much of it's kind of like passive, as in like, you know, we at Some Patches Required want to use like X artist music, so we have to go to whoever, you know, covers that from a licensing perspective.
Yeah. So
or sometimes Aaron just uses a couple seconds of a Bo Burnham song and then YouTube yells at us.
Oh yeah. No, from our side, there's really two main pieces. So originally I got my start more on the clearance stuff, just handling, like you said, requests that come in for material that we would own as like the Warner Music Group entirely. So it even goes further to like we own things that can go all the way back into the early 1900s to something that came out yesterday, you know. But there's just different breakdowns with specific labels and what's considered like frontline on roster acts and then catalog acts, you know. But catalog's huge for us right now. Like a lot of that stuff that happens, you know, let's say 70s, 80s, like a lot of that music's very hot, but we can also talk about that at a different point. But to answer your question about passive and, you know, actively approaching things, that's like a really important line that we talk about all the time. So we have, like I was saying, the clearance team, they'll field those requests that come in. For the most part, it's from your specific clients. Like they're like, hey, we're looking for XYZ artist and we want to put it in, you know, this new game we're coming out with. But then on the other side, a lot of this happens on the frontline labels just because those are the newer acts who are into gaming or into that kind of media realm. So they're like, hey, this artist has a new album coming out. I think they'd be a great fit for, you know, your project. So there's a lot of hustle there of trying to get those looks for those artists. And the best way that it works is if it's authentic in, you know, if that artist is a gamer themselves, like they always love to hear that. And that's the most organic, I guess, interaction you're going to get.
And that's how Riot landed Imagine Dragons, and they refused to drop them. I don't like Imagine Dragons very much.
Not our artists, so I have no... I have my own bias against them, but it doesn't affect me.
No, so out of curiosity, just like since we're already kind of inside baseball, a scant 4 minutes into our conversation, well, 5 minutes, I suppose. I've always been curious about this because, even games that have like really solid OSTs, especially my brain goes to like period pieces, like Assassin's Creed or something. I know that's not necessarily. I'm not sure if that's something that you've ever been involved with, but you will not hear, you know, pop music or retro music or whatever in the game. You're going to be getting, you know, like a sitar, or something like that, or, you know, fully original pieces, directed by Lorne Balfe, I think is one of their main like composers at Ubisoft. And there's a complete difference between that and what you hear in a lot of the trailers. So they'll do like the reveal cinematic trailer and it'll have Lord's version of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Which is like tonally fascinating that it kind of works. And that's specifically for Assassin's Creed Unity, which is a terrible, terrible, terrible game. But that first trailer was really solid and the music's weirdly fit. Are you involved in that like element of it as well, where you'd be hunting or passively being approached for music for trailers, or is it mostly just inside the experience content?
Yeah, it goes both ways. Like I guess do you guys want me to run through kind of how like a creative brief kind of comes in for something, or we can talk about trailers first?
I mean, whatever you think makes the most sense to respond with. I think we're good to follow your lead there.
Okay.
Yes, we are neophytes.
Sure. The short answer is yes, we do approach trailers. In fact, the latest, whatever they were working on for Assassin's Creed, I can't think of the newest game. It might have been Mirage. Yeah, I think even stuff beyond that we're talking to. Ubisoft's based out of Canada, so I guess our Warner Music Canada branch mainly handles it, but a lot of it comes through us if they want to handle like US rep, which I can also break down like how that works on a global stage. But yeah, they had briefs for the new Assassin's Creed title that was coming out, and they were like, hey, what kind of stuff can we fit in? And a lot of it also comes down to that thing, like you're saying, like using an artist like Lord or someone like that they can use a vocal and make it a new custom recording. Like you're seeing a lot of that now with custom recordings or, trailerization edits of things. Like trailerization is the biggest buzzword we hear all the time. And like I've had a pitch for Epic recently for a trailer on something, and they were just looking for like big, massive, it's those things you think like it's those giant boom clap songs and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the trailer for Infamous Second Son used the Dead Sarah version of Heart-Shaped Box by Nirvana.
Yeah.
And I don't recall that particular version of it being a huge hit, but Nirvana music is always really punchy for that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Or didn't Batman use a Nirvana
They had
song?
Nirvana. Yeah, they had Something in the Way, and it became like huge.
Yeah.
And I saw it get used in something recently, like TV wise, and I'm like, that's a really bold choice because like it was just in a massive blockbuster kind of motion picture, and like for you to use it again, like it is kind of carved into that film, like it's very tonally gonna always be Batman. So like I thought that was an interesting pick. But going back to the Ubisoft thing, because they were in our office a few months ago, we were talking about Just Dance and stuff. But it's crazy because they have a whole like music block to Ubisoft. Like they have it in France, their main headquarter space. I take that back. They're actually mostly all headquartered in Canada, but they have a France huge.
I think that's where they're incorporated. Is in France.
Yeah, they were. They were
Montreal's
like founded there. Yeah, but they have a Ubisoft music like entire branch where they do that stuff like you're saying for trailers. Well, they'll bring in people, build out all their custom music. And example, they just won. They won at I think it was at the Grammys, right? For like best. It was a new category this year. It was best music supervision or music placement for video games, and they won for Valhalla actually. Based on that kind of stuff of fully composed music, theme song, whatever it is. So that stuff's super cool.
Well, so going back to one of your comments, so it sounds like when they're working with you on the licensing side, they can take like a part of a song. They don't need to take the whole song, because I think you said something about like stripping the vocals from the original track and then making something new that they could go over. Like that's part of what you can get in a deal with a customer, or what a customer can get in a deal from you guys, if I understood that correctly.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, yes, like you can do that. It will cost you more money, and it will also be sometimes hard. It will sometimes be harder just given specific artists. Like if someone comes to us and they're like, I want Led Zeppelin and I just want Robert Plant's vocal, we're going to be like, all right, that's one, not going to happen because of particular stuff within the band. But also it's like, we're just not, every artist we have has a specific nuance to them for the most part. And it's our job on the back end, which one thing I'll say coming from the clearance side has helped me on the creative pitching side of things is knowing, hey, these artists are cool with things like this. Some artists don't like violent games. Some artists don't like specific content, like let's say drug use or so forth, which makes fair sense. But you have to kind of know that before you're pitching stuff out, because the biggest thing you don't want to do is send an artist or a song to someone and then them fall in love with it, and then on the back end, like an artist just like shoot it dead, And we've had things happen where you have to pivot, just because you think an artist would be a great fit, but then at the last second they're like, yeah, we don't really know about that. I mean, I had that happen to me just recently on a project I was working on. And, you know, you have to you can sit there and just like accept defeat, or you can kind of pivot, make a new change, give them some new ideas, which is kind of what I had to do. And then kind of get the most from it. But to answer the question of like breaking out stems and stuff, like the biggest question we get nowadays is like stem uses, because people want to be able to, I guess some songs get used a lot, you know, so they want something that's fresh, or they want to be able to fit the vibe of their project exactly to a T. So they'll go hire a producer or some other composer to take whatever those assets are, build in, you know, drum builds or string builds, just to kind of create that atmospheric change. But you get the nostalgia of like, oh, I know that song. So it's a fresh take, but it's also an old nostalgic feeling all at the same time. So I mean, it definitely is a thing we get a lot of, and we have to navigate, and we have to use specific language in our quotes that's like, you know, this is a limited one-time edit, so forth, just so we kind of protect ourselves, because there's a lot of legality stuff for the most part.
Oh yeah. Especially if you're talking about taking a pre-existing, you know, I mean, piece of art from an artist,
sure,
and manipulating it to suit your needs, you know, in any weird, strange, or very specific sort of way. I can imagine the legal verbiage has to be, I mean, precise as hell. Otherwise, you could run into a brick wall of trouble going 80.
Oh yeah, and there's also terminologies, like I will say from the timeline that I've handled these, mainly the gaming new media realm, like the growth we've seen has been crazy, but also the terminology changes have changed like a lot. And you're dealing with some clients who, let's say they're a little more old fashioned, like they were working on console games in the early 2000s, and they're trying to now handle VR stuff with the same language. And like there's a lot of catch up that you kind of have to do. So a lot of that is my job, to kind of build out those deal memos or so forth, and kind of align projects. Because like if I'm dealing with one, let's say it's like a VR rhythm game, and then someone else comes with their own, but they have older or like outdated terms, we have to kind of be like, dude, these artist managers are going to expect to see this, and if you're going to come to me with this, like we got to retool this whole thing. So a lot of that's kind of an education thing, because I know if you take those terms for this game that are totally outlandish to the same people who already approved something else, they're going to be like, well, what's the difference here, even though it looks like the same kind of game.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Would you mind, if you can?
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of differences in terminology that you use when you're kind of approaching these specific challenges?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the one thing that's kind of like the hot UGC is obviously like the biggest thing for us, like all the user generated content stuff.
Hey.
And there's like a huge topic of how far can it go. So like for us, we have UGC language for the most part that will break down like, hey, you can use this, but like Warner can collect any of, like, you can basically do whatever you kind of want with it, but we will not try to block or remove things as long as, like, because it's like a fully cleared song. So for us, and I guess years and years and years ago, everyone like can recall the gaming industry and the music industry having like the biggest feud ever about taking content creations down from people. And like there's still Minecraft videos out there somewhere where like someone had content like that, and like they're just roasting Warner Music Group like to it, absolutely destroying them. They're just like, they don't believe in like creators and stuff. So we have taken a huge approach, and I will condone that Warner themselves have taken a huge leap into like the Web3 stuff, anything in the VR space. Like they're very progressive, which is very cool, especially for what I'm doing, but also just from the company standpoint. Like we're not afraid to try new things or get involved with new game developers and so forth. So yeah, I mean the UGC thing's huge, because we'll have people come to us and they're like, well, we want to put our stuff like on, you know, Discord or YouTube, and like we have abilities to whitelist certain things, but we do have to know about some of this stuff. But if it goes on like a YouTube, I've always had the argument when I start working on this, like our admin team, before they would like pump out a license for payment, would always ask me like, is UGC included? And I'm like, we should put UGC on everything, because here's the thing, like there's so many content creators, there's so many people that play games nowadays. How are you going to dictate what's going to be made into UGC and what's not? Like it will never be like it's a ball that's like so large and out of control that you're never going to stop that thing. So someone's going to put their stuff on, whether you tell them they're not allowed to or not, you know? So it's better just for us to have the blanket VR YouTube agreement we have, some that's way above my pay grade, of just saying, hey, if a song's used here, like we have the ability to collect on these, but you can do kind of whatever you want. And if we remove your video, like we will put it back up kind of by like a accidental happenstance situation. We have a whole YouTube content protection team that is very cool about whitelist links, or if something gets blocked on accident, like we can get a hold of them pretty rapid fast, and kind of correct that kind of stuff.
Well, I would assume
that's fascinating. I actually hadn't.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I hadn't even really considered that entire angle when it comes to music licensing, but now I feel like a complete dingus for not thinking of it, because obviously that would be a huge component of working in licensing. Especially for music with a library as big as Warner's.
Yeah. And like, we've had people who, it was a conversation we probably had, I think it was probably a few years ago. You know, people would come to us and it was this issue before we kind of are at the stage we're at now, where, like I was saying, when the content creators were very gung-ho against the music labels for blocking their content, they were wanting to ask us to like whitelist channels when a event dropped, or when something like whatever they were working on came out. And UGC is very, very lucrative. Like there's so many content creators now that it's just like anything else. And especially if they're monetizing off that, like we don't want, selfishly, we don't want to like give that up, because there's a lot that can roll in from that. And like there's some labels out there, like indie labels, that are very like smaller than us, but they have made their entire backbone on like UGC and content protection stuff. Like that has been a huge moneymaker in the industry.
Well, I'd assume that you don't really care. When I say you, I'm more referring to Warner Music. Doesn't really care about like the Joe Schmo YouTube channel that gets 10 views and uses a song without licensing. It's more like you said, when people are making massive amounts of revenue, then Warner Music's like, okay, like we own that. Some of that money should go to us. But then at the same time, I'm curious, like, especially with user-generated content, I mean, are you seeing a lot of contracts where people, when I say people, I mean like development studios or publishers, are just outright like getting the license to a lot of different forms of content, and then there's an open-ended portion of the contract that basically says like, we're footing the bill for people to be able to use this content in their user-generated content or something like that? Like, just as an example of like what I'm talking about, like what if with Unreal or Fortnite for Unreal, or Unreal Engine for Fortnite, that's what it is, the last one, like I could see it being really cool of Epic to be like, we're providing all of this music for you all to use, creators. It's under us, like it's under a licensing agreement we have with all of these different Warner Music Group, whatever, Sony, etc. Like, is that a thing that you're seeing at all? Like basically publishers or studios purchasing access to music so that people can create content with that and they don't have to foot the bill? Or is that not really something that you're seeing a ton of? Because I'd imagine that'd be expensive. And I don't know in like the ROI for a developer if that's worth it for them, or if they'd rather put the burden on the creators themselves.
I will say I have a feeling it is going to start going this way, really only because of that whole with the creative worlds that are being built out in some of these games. Like, it's going to kind of have to start going that way. The way on our side, like, we're trying to navigate how that landscape looks, I guess, because a lot of times you're dealing with artists and their IP that might not want to be left in an open-ended world, and it's like, oh, how is my stuff going to be used? That's really that's like the thing we run into a lot of the problem with, is a lot of times we personally need to know, like, well, how are you going to use this? And it's getting trickier every day, especially in this space with different forms of media that are coming out. And it's like, okay, where's the song going to go? Is it going to be exported somewhere else? Is there tools that are going to allow people to like remix this audio and make their own thing? And it's like trying to track all those lines of monetization, or I guess just where the content's going to live, is really, really hard, because we tried to keep term limits from like internet use to like not perpetuity, and that's also really hard. And there's always an argument about that too. Like what were we talking about? Terminologies we were talking about earlier. Like the other thing that we always see is like archive rights, and some people refer to archive as like, well, I want to leave that on my Instagram channel, like in my feed. But in reality, the definition of archive we have is like it's behind a paywall on like your site. Like let's say it's EA Games, and they have an archive of like their old trailers. We're like, okay, that's fine. Like you can leave it specifically on your page or whatever. But then for some of those licensing people, they're like, well, that's just because my client wants to leave it on their social media and they don't want to take the videos down. And we're like, okay, then it's going to cost a little bit more money if you want perpetuity rights or something like that. Like we're starting to treat trailers for these kind of games. One, they've always been treated on more of a commercial side because you're selling a product. But on the other end, we're starting to treat them a lot more like movie and film trailers, because they're big budget. Like some of the stuff, like I handle Apex Legends and stuff, and we had the last 2 trailers for them, and those things were like fully edited, animated, like massive cinematic compositions for like 2.5, 3 minutes with big. There was a lot of big catalog music in that. So, I mean, fee wise and stuff for that, we're kind of aligning it with almost like a AAA film at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I would say it's at least in terms of the quality of the products that come out in terms of video game trailers. I think the production value, at least from like a visual and audio perspective, as someone who doesn't work on that side of anything,
sure,
they've been kind of at that level for a really long time. I mean, there's a difference between a crappy AI voice trying to sell you a terrible mobile game,
right,
and a trailer for the next big, another really good example would be like the trailer for The Last of Us Part 2, my favorite video game trailer ever. That, not a huge elaborate trailer, but
sure,
exceptional production.
Oh yeah.
I would say that's definitely on par or better than certain live action trailers for like film or TV and stuff like that.
Sure.
Definitely better than the Bumble ads I keep getting on YouTube. which I'm going to just rant about this for 15 seconds, even though it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It pisses me off so much that I need to talk about it to somebody. It's just a boy. Like they took a phone to a college campus and they found a boy.
Yeah.
And they put him by a tree. And they said, you have one line. Find what you are looking for on Bumble. And then just don't look offensive or scary, and just stand by the tree, and then I'll buy you a Wendy's 4 for $4 and we can go. And I get this ad so often, and it makes me very frustrated. And then I started getting a new version of it where it's like a young woman kind of sitting at the base of the same tree. And I recognize the tree. I'm sorry, that's not.
And then they find each other under the tree, and the tree is Bumble. They found each other.
If it turned into some sort of like weird meta storyline where the next one is them like dating under the tree, like they're picnicking under the tree, and then later they're getting married under the tree, then I would start to respect it. But in the meantime, that's just the laziest commercial, and that's just an ad, I mean, it's a 5-second ad spot.
Right.
Yeah.
I get that there's obviously a huge difference, but I hate that tree, and I don't like the boy. The boy is annoying. It's just like, this is a moderately attractive college sophomore. We found him. We'll pay him in chicken nuggets. So anyway, sorry. But again, that level of production is completely different than something that you'd see in, again, like even the older Assassin's Creed trailers, like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood had this, insane, really, cinematic trailer. All their cinematic trailers have been pretty solid.
Yeah, and you would see those trailers, like, especially for me, because I played a lot of those back in the day. I still actually do, but you'd see those and they'd be so hyped because the graphics were like insanely good. But then you're playing on your Xbox 360 and you're like, why are these graphics not the same? It's like,
oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's why you always have to look at. I think Zach, you and I have talked about the difference between like cinematic trailers are designed to hype and gameplay trailers are a little bit more honest, even if they're not always accurate. But yeah, cinematic trailers completely obviously pre-rendered, better fidelity and everything, and a song you're definitely not going to hear in the game.
Right.
So, well, I think the interesting thing on some of what you're talking about with ads is that just using the example of like Take-Two, big publisher, obviously kind of one of the titans of the games industry. Their biggest segment in terms of like who actually makes the money is Zynga. And where I'm going with this is that I think it's hilarious that mobile games are just typically so shittily promoted, and their trailers are often horrible and make me want to like beat myself and some other things that I won't say out loud. But I just think it's so funny that mobile games is I forgot the exact numbers, but mobile games is at least like double the revenue that comes from like PC console. And yet that's it's like insane. PC console that's, shoving all the money into these like trailers and whatnot. And obviously they're two different markets is the reason, but I just think it's funny.
My new favorite mobile ad that I've ever seen. Are you familiar with those games where there's like two different pillars or something, and you go through one and it evolves your civilization? It's just a track going straight forward and it evolves your civilization by 100 years, or you go to the red one and it shrinks it down. I saw one of those and it was like trying to evolve your weapon by increasing in years of advancement, up from like a rock and a cloth to a tank or something. But
that's a logical jump.
Yeah, it is. But like these games are not good. But the text on it was just like a shitty free play song playing in the background. But the text that was overlaid over it didn't change, like as if to indicate narration. It was just one line that said, "My gun in too small."
Yo, I agree.
My gun profound. In too small. How big in your gun? Zach, how big in your gun?
Yeah, I can relate.
It's just like the lack of any effort being put into a game that's probably making money is wild. So there's that same. It's the boy with the tree and my gun in too small.
I mean, there's one of those though where you literally start as like a sperm cell and then like turn into more sperm cells and then turn into like babies or something. I don't know. It's crazy. Like there's
kind of a spore
no
situation.
Zach, you were saying that your numbers on the mobile thing was based off revenue. That was like pretty much like double whatever PC
it's like market size. Yeah, it's market size. I saw one recently that was shared at like work, and it was like, oh, here's kind of like roughly what the breakdown is over time in terms of like, what's what the markets looked like since video games came out. So, like obviously in the beginning, like arcade was huge, and then arcade's like a sliver now. But if you look at like now, mobile is by far the largest market segment in game development. Like it just rakes in tons and tons of dollars because of the way that they're able to do like advertising to monetize the games. You've got higher access to in-app purchases. Like the amount of money that specifically like mobile publishers have, it's like it's crazy. Like there's a reason the New York Times bought Wordle.
Oh yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Anyway, and I think the craziest thing that I heard recently was, and Alex, I promise we'll go back to your thing, but I'll just finish this, which is like, I think it's like Solitaire. It's like Solitaire and all these like really what you would consider to be kind of like more boring, generic games, like the Connect 3 games, blah 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 blah, Wordle. Those are like the most popular. That's what brings in the most revenue. Are these really simplistic games that like not to insult our parents, but our parents can play and understand and engage with.
No,
Word cookies.
it's very true. I just had, I mean, I won't say the game specifically, but let's just say it's like one of the bigger or the largest like music-based app on the stores. Their co-founder was in last week in LA, so I met up with them. And I'm not very hip. Not very into the mobile games. Like, I'm not downloading a mobile game on my phone and like playing it for ages. Like, sure, did I play Candy Crush back in the day? Yeah, but like, there's just things like, I don't know. It's not my first go-to of like, let me pull my phone out and play a game on here. But we were running through because I asked a question like, do you guys study the charts to see like where you guys are at? And from his point of view, he's like, no, we don't really care about that. Like, we have the market share tapped for our game. We know what our downloads are. We know what our demographics are. And we just let the charts kind of speak for themselves. He's like, well, let's take a look at them. And like, when you look at those download charts, like it is crazy that there's like solitaire and all that stuff's in there because it's just like easy downloadable for an older demographic, like you were saying. And yeah, they'll just pump those full of marketing campaigns because they have just eyeballs on it. It's wild.
Yeah. No, it's insane. Like how much some of those companies make a month. Just as an example.
Well, and the amount of downloads, like example I had when I was having a conversation with my client, they were like, yeah, we had like 54 million downloads in the last 18 months. Like that's an insane amount of people. And like those people, I asked about retention, and like it might not always be the highest retention, but they're like, as long as you can kind of keep like the numbers like around 10% by end of month over and over, like that's like a good retention rate. And it's like, I think they were around that, but some people are going to be obviously lower. Like you could have a hot app and then everyone just drops off and never plays it again. But if you are good with that development, I guess you can kind of keep it up. But that retention is hard.
There's the whole hyper casual side of games where like, and of course, like, so if you're following this development cycle, they'd never interact with you, Alex, because you'd be too much of an expense, I'd assume. But like, there's the whole hyper casual side where the whole purpose is like, how many games can we get out as quickly as possible? And how quickly can you monetize people with ads? And it's insane. I think they push a game out in like a month, if that. Like, and they'll pull in millions, literally millions of dollars. Not everybody's doing that, but it's like, you, Aaron, for example, let's say you have a moment of weakness, you see one of these wonderful ads online and you're like, you know what, I'm giving in, I'm gonna see what it's all about, having big gun or whatever. And it's this like really simple game you're only gonna play once, and they throw like, I don't know, 5-6 ads at you and you're like, wow, this sucks, I hate this. It's like that's you and so many other people. It took us like 5 seconds to make that game and that skin of the game, and they make like, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million, whatever. It's crazy. The whole
just
mobile world
my
is
gun
insane.
Is too small.
Yeah. Well, that tangent aside, I did want to ask at some point, Alex, I knowing you, or me knowing you, for as long as I have, and being in, the trip that I think inspired a lot of us to kind of pursue our careers in entertainment a little bit more directly at OU. I know that you were not always interested in necessarily being as close to video games as you are now. To clarify that statement, I don't think you were ever like opposed to it. I just don't know that that's where you necessarily like saw yourself landing. I think it's interesting if you could kind of like get into how that happened, because my understanding is it's kind of like a like you kind of just wiggled yourself into a niche after you were given, a client set that kind of fit into this new media games area. But I think it'd be interesting if you elaborated.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, going even back to like how I started at Warner, after graduation, I pretty much moved immediately out to Los Angeles. I had an internship lined up with them for the summer, and it was like a paid internship. It was a way to get out here and have my parents at least be like, oh, he's going to make some kind of money, even though it was like nothing, and it's in Los Angeles, like the most expensive city in the U.S.
And then I'm going to cut you off just real quick, very briefly, just for context for people who maybe didn't go to OU. We should explain that there is an OU in LA, Ohio University in Los Angeles program where you can apply for, this opportunity to take what is essentially an extended class and get out into Los Angeles and line up internships and get some industry experience with one of the professors, and you all just kind of live out there for a full summer. I did not take that trip, but that is the trip to which Zach was referring.
For clarity,
just
that
for
is
context.
the trip I was referring to, but Alex is talking about post that.
No, but I figured you said this trip that inspired all
I
of
was
us.
being
purposely. There's
a
a level of vagary to this that
well, I didn't want to out
I feel
the
may have been alienating to some people who didn't go to the great Ohio University.
Yeah, that's very true.
Sorry, did not mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, you're fine. And to Aaron's point, and then also going back to Zach's point too, that trip was before I even decided to move out after graduation. That was definitely a big helping factor in okay, I do want to move out there. That's kind of the industry I want to be in. I knew I wanted to be in music per se, but I was never really into the New York scene. Nashville, I'm a fan of, but at the time, I wasn't a country music guy. I'm still not, and it's grown a lot down. It's grown a lot down there, tech wise and stuff. But
yeah,
for Sync, it was New York, and you can be in the brand and advertising side, or it's hey, Los Angeles is where the film and TV world is at for that. Let's kind of run there. And when I was in school, your big conversation that you always kind of had was I want to be in music supervision, which you always, if you're watching your favorite film or movie, they're the people that are really behind the scenes, kind of making final decisions on what songs are played, at a pivotal moment in the movie where you can either, cry in your seat or, a big action scene where there's something going on. That job is essentially a tastemaker for that film or television program. And that was that's a very sought after position. It still is. And Sync has grown, exponentially higher. I'll say now being in the role I am, I don't know how lucrative music supervision is to me. Just knowing some of them, there's some that are amazing. They have a lot of creative freedom, but there's a lot of other people who it's not as loose as hey, let's build a Spotify playlist and that's what's going to go in my film. You have directors, you have showrunners, you have logistics of actually being able to get specific songs. So the music supervision role is a lot more admin based and a lot more it's not as glamorous, I guess, on paper as you might think it is. So that was a side tangent. But going back to Warner time, I came out in the summer, did the internship. As it was ending, I live out here in Los Angeles now. So as it's ending, I'm oh, do I have to go job search around? And coincidentally, they were actually hiring in my department right as I was ending my time. So I went and talked with my supervisor for the internship, who still works with me now. And she's yeah, we were going to talk with you. We'd love to hire you on. But it's totally your decision. You can apply. You have to go through the interview process just for formality reasons. But we think you have a good chance, obviously, of getting the job because you're already here. You're aware of how it goes. And, so did that, got hired on. And when you first start off, I was assisting my VP of my department now. And you learn a lot of kind of the, deal negotiation, what the terms look like, how to format emails to managers. So you learn that. I did that for about a year and then got let loose and had my own clients. And you start off with your smaller TV shows, ABC stuff or Jimmy Fallon show, James Corden. It's very small money deals, but it's just things to learn the approach of going to the artist, going to labels, getting their okay, quoting back, kind of building client relations. And some people, how our generation is, some people just don't like talking on a phone. Some people don't like dealing with people. And I think that's a big deciding factor of, are you going to elevate really, really quick in this industry? Do you have that ability to build a good client relationship? I take pride in that. I love going out and meeting my clients. I love picking up a phone, calling them versus just sitting on emails all the time. Like that human interaction, or just putting like a face to the name or a voice to the name even, it can, one, create so many, or I guess prevent issues more than anything else, of just, you can read an email in whatever tone you want, and it's just very, you might think someone's a total, bitch or something, and you're like, oh, they're actually a super nice person. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of did all that stuff, built my groundwork, and then it was in 2019, end of that year, I'd gotten promoted, and I was given mostly some of the sport clients like Fox Sports. And then I also was given gaming stuff, and I don't know. I don't know exactly why it was given to me. It was given to me for the most part, I think, because I don't know. My boss kind of told me, he's like, "Well, you're a guy in the department, and like we have a lot of."
Oh God.
It was kind of like that. Like, my one boss is like very old school. He's been around for 40 years, and he's just, he's a very nice guy, but sometimes he's just very blunt about it, and like that's kind of how it fell into that realm. And my buddy who handles it for the publishing side, he's kind of the same way. Like, we tag team things together. It's like, and sports and gaming are usually kind of comboed together, of sort of like, oh, you kind of have interest in that. But I guess the other big thing on top of that was that it wasn't a huge sector. Like, gaming was down for a little minute. Like, it was always there, but it wasn't what it is now. So in 2019, like, I remember going into a meeting. It might even been right at the beginning of 2020. I remember going into a meeting with our whole team, and we were looking at like a pie chart of revenue and income. And me, I'm just like asking a question. I was like, oh, where's gaming at on this chart? And it was like this really, really, really tiny, like almost microscopic section of this pie. And like, obviously TV and film were just like dominating the whole thing. And it was almost like a laughing matter in the room of like, oh yeah, it's like right here. And I was just like, okay, like, and I kind of like told myself, I'm like, okay, I'm going to like try to change that a little bit. But also, like, it was almost like a weird foreshadowing moment. Like, let's imagine we're watching a film and like that happens, then like all of a sudden it like goes the complete opposite direction. So 2020 happens, lockdown happens, and we kind of all start working remote. And the first project I worked on right at that time was the Travis Scott Fortnite concert. That was like the first thing that I kind of had a small piece on. We only had a sample for Notorious B.I.G. But it was sort of like the first time I dove into working with a big game developer like that. And it was my team that I work that represents the Fortnite and Epic Games people. And yeah, so like from there, like that teed off, and then I started working on NBA 2K for that summer for their soundtrack. And then it was, all the EA games, these are kind of like your annual games you see every single year. But from that point on, like, it just astronomically grew, and we would get our reports, and like every single month we were up 100% or more, pretty much in money and also just amount of deals that came in. So, and it's relatively high, but like compared to, we run reports that basically track like 3 years time, and like you can always compare back to even a couple years, and it's just, it's a nice it's a nice gradual growth in the gaming side. So it's kind of where I am now.
That's awesome. So I mean, it sounds more or less like they I mean, obviously you did a good enough job that your interview was for formality's sake.
Sure.
Post internship, and then you just kind of got handed more or less on a whim a couple of gaming accounts, and then you started, between the world being, I don't know, let's say in a position
right
to accelerate that growth, and then combine that with solid work on your part. And I have to imagine that some of your I mean essentially customer service, customer relations skills, helped you distinguish yourself within that space. And now, is that predominantly what you do? Is games, or are film and TV still kind of a component of your role?
Yeah. So to go back to your one point, like, that's very true. The biggest, I guess, just truth factor is film and TV. The amount of stuff there, like a volume of deals there is a lot. So, I mean, we have a team of, 8 to 12 people on the clearance side, a handful of creatives, and also the admin people who are doing the licensing and actual collection of the money. But like for that clearance chunk, I guess the biggest thing is like gaming wasn't super, super large that it could like cause more people to be hands on with it, So it was sort of like I was assigned it and I had to just pick up, even though it started coming in real hot and heavy, I had to basically pick that all up and run with it. Even though I didn't have, let's say, the most experience, like it's just a blatant truth. And like my boss has even told me that. He's like, you're a pretty crazy anomaly because like you didn't, like there's a lot of people that have kind of your duties that have way more experience in the industry. He's like, I'm not trying to say it like in a degrading way, but it's just like blunt truth. He's like, but the way you kind of picked up and ran with it, like we don't have any reason to kind of not trust you with it in a way. So I had to build a lot of that trust, and I also grew like a lot as an employee for those couple of years because it was like so much pressure or responsibility on me to kind of run with it, and I didn't really have anyone to kind of go to because we were all kind of learning in real time because there was a lot of new games coming onto the market that we'd never seen before, or a lot of the Web3 experiences that we had never seen before. So it was kind of it was learning on the fly. But yeah, I mean, to go to your film and TV thing, I still handle some TV clients, and we also always have like random one-off films that come into us, so we'll handle those kind of things too. Most of that's on the clearance side, just kind of like, hey, we want to use this catalog song, and it's very like cut and paste. That stuff's very kind of blunt, like they know exactly what terms they want. It's like, well, we want all media excluding theatrical, or we want theatrical. Like there's still some nuances with streaming and stuff that goes into, but I would say I mean biasedly, I don't think it's as intense as some of the gaming or new media deal discussions that go down, just because there's just more things that can kind of go wrong with it, or there's branding elements, and then it's like, oh, who do we got to talk to for that? Like there's just a lot of pieces, I guess, versus a film or TV medium.
Yeah, I suppose even just YouTube being what it is.
Oh yeah.
There's really not that many. I mean, you can definitely find like a couple of the channels that I follow on YouTube will do like watch along sorts of things for movies, but you can't actually put the footage up, obviously.
Sure.
But the Let's Play market is so huge that you need to kind of consider that, I'm assuming, in terms of like this person is making a ton of money using licensed music that they did not themselves license. So I mean that alone must complicate things to a pretty insane degree.
Well, I just saw like literally last night that there's as part of Discord Nitro, there's like a watch along feature on YouTube. I guess because we had the whole thing of like people streaming content that people didn't want streamed in Discord to people who didn't have, Hulu or whatever accounts. So yeah, no, it's getting more complicated with streaming for sure. And not to demean any of the work that you did, Alex, but I wonder too,
Sure.
like if any of the growth potential was possible before you were in the role, and it was just having someone more dedicated to that space that actually understood what was going on. Because, I don't think it's entirely true that games are as different as sometimes people in the games industry want to think it is.
Right.
But they are in some ways. So I do wonder, how much of the potential had been there for a while, and then just having you, take that on in more of an ownership leadership role.
Oh,
and really
yeah.
digging into that unlocked some of that potential outside of the fact that COVID was going on. And obviously, yes, COVID,
Right.
Accelerated a lot of growth and definitely did play a role. But
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I would say
general,
that sounds very demeaning, Zach, actually. And I think you should apologize for.
I should apologize right now.
No, I mean, I agree with you to like one extent, because like for me, like I'll see numbers, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I did all that, but then you got to tell yourself like it's the industry of how it's shifting. Like we have more, like with any of the VR stuff, like a game like Beat Saber, and then all the versions that came after that, like those are all my clients. They generate us good revenue. They're really good to us on a partner side with our artists. But it's like, yeah, VR wasn't a thing, so like that's new stuff that we kind of tapped into. But there's other things like I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think there were lost opportunities just because of maybe negligence on an employee side, or just not diving in enough because it wasn't, I don't know, they weren't, it's still not that, they like, games do not pay as much, obviously, as a film or TV show. There's some that pay very, very well, but there's also some that are like still very stuck in their ways. And it's kind of because it sat for so long, it's like trying to rewrite those precedents is kind of hard, to be honest. But we're trying every day.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's insane to consider. As you look at the growth of the games industry at large, it's insane to consider how young it still is.
Sure.
Because especially people in our generation, we grew up with games just kind of being a presence in our lives.
Oh yeah.
And in reality, it wasn't too long before any of us picked up our first, Game Boy or whatever, or NES or wherever you started, that that was confined to arcades.
Oh yeah.
Right. Read Console Wars, and we were all around for a portion of that, like a pretty significant portion of it.
Oh yeah.
But it's still, that's not even that long ago. Everything feels long ago now.
Oh yeah, it's just because that the technology exponential thing, like 10 years ago.
I can't remember what that rule is called.
Yeah.
That thing about processing speed, like more or less doubling.
Yeah.
Every year.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's like Moore's law or something like that.
Yeah, but we're getting to the point where that's starting to.
Yeah, that's starting to diminish. Yeah. The exponential growth curve, or rather diagonal, is no longer necessarily as true as it used to be.
Really?
But I mean, it's it's exploded.
Graphics cards are starting to get bigger because we're having issues with being able to make things smaller and smaller, but be more proficient in.
Is that why some of the consoles are like bigger in size now? Like some of the components just have to get.
I don't
larger?
think the last console. I don't believe that the last console gen was impacted by it. But if you look up. I'm not like a super big computer whiz, but you can find some memes about some of the new graphics cards. And one of them was like 10 years from now. And it's literally what looks to be like an AC unit hanging out of someone's window, but it's their graphics card.
That's hysterical.
Wow.
I mean, I can definitely say that, like, just to lean into my bias and the fact that I haven't really messed around with the Series X. The PlayStation 5 is considerably larger than either the PlayStation 3 or 4. Oh, yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. I've seen them
it was actually, that was a meme when it came out.
Yeah.
They're giant. Mine's sitting in the other room. And I mean, some of that is, I think, just an affectation to try and make it look cool.
Sure.
Like, they didn't necessarily need the wings, but even without the wings, it's not a heavy console. But it is comfortably, I would say, at least 25% bigger than the PS4 sitting right next to me.
Wow.
It is a large console. So yeah, no, I mean, like, that's definitely the case. But again, we're kind of beating around the bush vis-a-vis the purpose of having you on the show. But yeah, I mean, so what have been some of the most, like, challenging projects, and then we can start wrapping up and everything. But what have been some of the most challenging projects that you can talk about to kind of bring together in a way that was mutually beneficial for both your place of work and your client?
Sure. One of the most,
just curious about that.
Yeah, one of the most challenging and fun, I guess, was one I just wrapped up. It's actually going to come out on June 13th, and the trailer or announcement, I think, should be happening like next week or something. But I was working with candidly off topic. When's this podcast going live?
It'll be after that date.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, fine. Sorry, something cool to talk about.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, so this project will come out June 13th. Trailer announcement should be coming out after Memorial Day. But it's with a game developer. What is their name? They're owned by Funcom out of Norway. The game is called Metal Hellsinger. It's a rhythm action game, and the original game launched in the fall, and they had like all custom score pieces that were all sung by like pretty well recognizable metal singers. So it got like a really cool niche market, I guess, for like metalheads. Like they were very like, oh, this is sick. Like it's a game for us. And it was cool how the game progressed. Like you would get extra bonus like level up points if you like reloaded your gun at the same time. It's like it's a very arcade style shooter, first person. You're like in hell and you're like trying to battle your way through like the different levels. So like as you progressed with your gameplay, they would add. This kind of goes to your discussion earlier about stems and that kind of stuff. They would put in like different stems for the track. So like first you'd get like a drum beat, and then if you got better gameplay, like you'd earn the guitar or like bass, and then the very final, before you like unleashed all your power ups, you'd get the vocals, and like you just go ham after that. So it was a very yeah. So the people online, like on Reddit, wherever else, Discords, everything, like they were all about the soundtrack. And they're like, man, I got to get this like on vinyl. I want to get this released. Like, what's the status? So a couple months ago, they started releasing a little bit more DLC with some of these also custom creations. But on the back end, they had come to me via actually an old client that I used to handle EA games with. She came to me and had approached me on doing a DLC pack with them. And they had a pretty healthy fee. But the terms, this goes back to my conversation earlier of like, someone who's been in the industry for 20 some years then tries to come to you with a new thing and they have been out of the game for a little bit. Like those terms changed, a month before or months before that they ever came to me. So on my side, I'm like, hey, we got to talk about this deal structure. So this was like months in the making, but I took that whole deal structure they had, rebuilt the whole thing myself, which this is where my clearance background comes to help. Because let's say I had just been doing creative and pitching songs to them, which was the next step to this. Like, if I didn't have that deal memo broke out, or if I was relying on someone else, like there's a lot of line of communication that gets lost there. So being able to kind of control it all under my own house was very nice. So built that out, gave it a nice healthy fee on a tier structure based on like the kind of songs. And then also like a rev share on the back end, and kind of capped the term down a little bit. And then we were able to get some requests out. The original ask was they were going to be looking for like various genre DLCs. And to back up a little bit, they were now looking for actual commercial recordings. So they were going to do like a essential rock pack of just like rock hits that everyone knows. And they weren't going to do the stem thing for this. They just wanted the actual song. So it kind of started there. But then they wanted to do like an EDM pack. They wanted to do like a punk pack and so forth. So they're going to still go down that line, I believe, at a further date. But it started off with, I had an artist in mind that I thought would be a great fit. And I pitched it to the label because I had to go through them, who had to go through management. And like, ultimately, we got, this was like where the trouble came in. The game was very adamant, like, oh God, we're so happy to like have this. And then it kind of fell through. So we had to make a total 180 pivot. And meanwhile, I'm like pitching them songs, like everything we have that I think would fit, I'm sending to them. And they are telling me like what works with the game, what doesn't. And then they would like fall in love with something. And then I'd go get the clearance and they go, actually it doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, why did we, like it was frustrating. We're all learning at the same time. Like I'm learning. Cause like, and the other thing I guess that is the other barrier here is it's a Norway based game. So we're now dealing with like international clearance people. So on the publishing side, they're clearing the writers through international affiliates, which it's then like maybe coming to the US to clear that because it's very complicated. But the one benefit, the one benefit we have from our side is that we treat it from a global standpoint. So for me, I jumped in and I talked to our affiliate in Norway. I'm like, hey, this is the situation with this game. I'm going to get you all the pieces and then you can just collect the money once it's finished. Like, just let me do it and we'll get it done. He's like, sounds good. Like, deal. That's amazing for me. So because the one artist partnership fell through, they basically were like, well, we're just going to do like an 8-song pack of just massive hit songs, various genres. Like, the artists we have in there was anyone from like Gorillaz to Paramore to Disturbed. Like, it was very all over the place. But we got it done, and it was very challenging. That was probably like a 3-month process to get this all done. But it was the first thing I think I've done where I ran it from like top to bottom. And also because of the work I put in, they decided to go Warner Music exclusive, and they didn't go with any other label. So it was actually, it was a huge win for us, and it looks really good for like revenues, especially on the foreign side, like for our Norway office, for example.
That's rad.
Yeah.
I would say your promotion notice should be coming up here in a couple of weeks. So congrats preemptively.
Thanks. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no stress. But Zach, unless you had any other particular things, I figured we'd probably jump like towards last question because we're hitting about that time.
Well, what I will say, I don't know, Alex, maybe your situation's slightly different, but your role's close enough to mine that I'm sad to say, Aaron, that generally a promotion doesn't follow its okay, now do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we get you to do 5 more of
corporate.
those?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I was mostly making a funny ha.
no, I know.
Of course.
No, yeah. So what I would say, Alex, typically, before we sign off and have you plug socials and that kind of thing, we like to just ask, in terms of, how you got to where you are now, and people interested in, getting into the creative space, getting into games, getting into music, whatever it might be,
or film,
or
TV.
film, the gambit is large. What is your biggest piece of advice for people based on your experience and what you've gone through in your career so far, to people that are, in the position we were in, graduating from college?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when I was at OU, it was really like, I did not go there with the intention of being in the music industry at all. Like, before I was looking at any schools, I was looking a lot at like design schools. Like, I was a art kid in school. That was like where my bread and butter was at. I didn't want to go to the design schools, mainly just because of the size of them and also the cost. Like, they were astronomically expensive. So I ultimately landed at OU because they had the media school just in general was really solid. And then I was like, I'll figure it out from there. Maybe I want to go into animation. Then I kind of was like, not really into that. But I was still hovering around like that film realm of just like, oh, maybe I can find something within there. It wasn't really until I took a couple classes music industry wise that I'm like, oh, there's jobs in the music industry that aren't just I play music and I'm an artist. Like, it was weird that I never thought about that, but like, it's really no different than any other business job somewhere else. It's just your day-to-day work and clientele base is just music people and like artists and stuff like that. And it's really weird to think about that, but like, really any job is just a marketing branch, and everything's there just as like a company, I guess. So at OU, I think the biggest thing, or just taking classes when you're in college in general, like the biggest thing you learn there is kind of the existence of something, but then also the terminology. Like, I can say a lot of the terminology and stuff that I learned there, like, is still sufficient to what I kind of do now. The thing you don't learn is how to do the job or anything else besides that. Like, you can learn on paper, oh, this is like what it is, but you don't actually know how to do it until you're there. Because example, I was talking about music supervision earlier. Like, that was something I really wanted to get into, of being a music supervisor, working on film and TV, and kind of picking out songs for things. And everyone still wants to do that job. The problem is those jobs are very, like, the hard truth is they are very relationship based, and you're essentially a freelance worker. Like, a lot of those people had a break. If you hear their stories or them like speak on a panel, they'll literally tell you like, oh, well, I went to a school and like the filmmaker at the time, like, it was an art film, or like it went to a film festival, like, and then it got big, so like that's a lottery chance that that's going to happen. So you build that relationship with that filmmaker, and as they progress through their career, you progress with them because you're going to be their go-to music supervisor for all their projects. Like, they're comfortable with you. That's just how it's going to be. My one internship that I had when I was in the LA program was with a company who does like all the stuff for HBO, and the one lady there handled like every Ryan Murphy show. So that's like everything on FX that was American Horror Story and so forth. And she ultimately, got big enough that went and started her own company. So now that business isn't coming into her previous employer, but because she had a relationship, like she knows, like, oh, I'm good to do my own stuff, and you'll see that happen a lot. Like they'll just kind of become their own LLC, have their client relation, and then they get all their projects. So it's just it's a comfortable thing at that point. And you can be a music supervisor, I guess, for like a studio. Like NBC has their own in-house supervisors, and like that's a good job because you have a full-blown salary, and then you just work on the projects they have come into them. But if you really want to be the ones like working on some of those films and stuff, like it's a lot harder than kind of what you expect. Sync wise, if you're working for a label or something, I mean, the way to get in, it's unfortunate, but a lot of times you got to start like internship wise. And the music industry itself, like just being blunt, doesn't always pay you the best. It is the culture is definitely better, and Warner is great. Like the family feel it has there, the community feel it has is amazing. I really have no complaints. But if you're about money, don't go to the music industry. You can go to tech, you can go to any of those kind of those startups. Like if you're specifically looking at games, it depends where you want to start. I mean, I love where I'm at, but like, let's say I was to maybe progress out, down the line in the future, whatever. I think I could make that transition into the gaming sector just because I have built up that knowledge on the back end. But even on like the film and TV side, if you start in music, you can bounce over to a film studio, and they have kind of opposite to what we have. They have like music clearance people who work for like Sony Pictures, So like you can really bounce out to different sectors just kind of based on what you're interested in. But I mean, if you want to be supervisor, the number one thing is like get involved with indie projects, get involved with indie films, and just kind of like outsource yourself, because there's a lot of things depending on what college you go to. You can definitely try to get involved with a filmmaker of that sort, or just put your stuff into things, or I guess kind of try to figure out how to do it in a freelance way. It's a grind, but people do it. Like people do it all the time, and that's kind of how you start. Like a lot of the stuff we see on our day-to-day job, even though we deal with main like huge productions and everything like that, like there's a lot of indie film stuff that comes into us as well, and like student films. Like there's so much stuff, and those people just they get a credit for that, just by kind of handling it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say internships is going to be your way to do it. And like, obviously where you're based, that's the other thing. Like a lot of times people want to do things remotely, but it might not be logistic. Like we're kind of on that tail end now of what we had a couple years ago. So, you're looking at your big cities to kind of try to get into that music industry, whether that's New York or Los Angeles, maybe Nashville, even though Sync's not that big there. There is a lot of tech there. So, it's kind of dependent on the person.
So I mean, it sounds like more or less we can usually end up distilling a lot of the answers to these questions that we've gotten as just like go in and do it.
Yeah.
Find a way to just do the thing. Decide if you like it, because the more you know about it, the more you'll know if it's the right fit for you and what you want to do and how you want to express yourself creatively and how lucrative that may or may not be. And yeah. So hey, I'd say that's a pretty solid answer.
For the most part, that is like, yeah, that's very true. Like get in and do it. But also the other thing I think is like, if you are looking for something more creative in like a creation aspect, like let's say you're really into design or like marketing or something, like sync might not be the thing you want to do. Like it is very admin oriented on some of the back ends. Like there's a lot of data search you got to do, even if you're on the creative side for that. Like you might have ideas to like pitch things out here and there, but there's still a lot of groundwork you have to do of like that deal negotiation. Like at the end of the day, everything is sales. Like even if you have an opportunity for an artist or something, like you got to take that to those people and you got to like sell it to them. And then you also have to sell it to the production you're with, and you got to marry those two together. Like it's a lot more than just like, oh, I'm going to build out these playlists and then like send it off. And like, that's my job. Like it's very complex. It's very complicated. Yeah, it's a grind.
Well, to avoid keeping you too long, what I'll end on is thanks for coming on and talking with us, Alex.
Yeah.
No, thank you guys.
Seriously, huge thank you for taking the time. We are coordinating this across 3 distinct time zones, and it's been a little bit of legwork on that side. Surprisingly easy, all things considered. But thank you so much for waking up on a holiday weekend to we're dating the episode, but who cares? To just have a little chat with us, and I really enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate I appreciate you giving us the time.
Of course, I appreciate
sharing
you
some of your insight.
This is really exciting. I always
and
like
then
if you have stuff.
If you have anything to plug too, Alex, because I know you have some side projects that you're always working on. Feel free to do any of that right now in terms of like socials, what you're working on, whatever.
Right now.
This
Don't
exact
wait.
Moment. Yeah.
Right. So like right now.
Yes.
No, 5 minutes from now.
Hurry.
All right.
No.
So
Sorry,
do I
I'm
put my own social in here too, like my main one?
If you want,
Yeah,
I mean, it's literally whatever you're interested in sharing.
Gotcha. All right. So yeah, for any of the listeners, you can find me on mostly Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn. Send me a follow if you want. But on Instagram, I'm at doc_Malcom_designs. Mainly, this was just like a design account at one point, but now it's kind of like my photo, blog, concert following, whatever I'm into. My secondary side hustle I have on Instagram is I run a food account, and that's Eats by Alex, a period after each of those words. So Eats period Alex period, Eats period by period Alex, and then follow me, get some food inspiration, some recipes. Outside of that,
oh yeah, man, we have to talk after this.
Yeah, of course. Outside of that, I also run some artist management with my buddy Matt, who's based in Nashville. He's a rock artist. You can go follow him at Matt Sahadi. Very Springsteen, Tom Petty kind of stuff. But yeah, we make some great music. We have some stuff coming out. So yeah, all in all.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's awesome. You got your fingers in many pies here, it seems like.
Yeah,
I hope you washed your hands, man. That's all I can say.
Yeah, man. You don't want to get that compote all over everything. But yeah, that's awesome. I'll have to check some of that out myself. But yeah, in the meantime, again, just one final thank you for hopping on, having a conversation with us. Hopefully some people have taken a little bit away from this, because one of the things that we kind of like to do is talk about these, I would say, like hidden corners of multiple industries that don't really get a huge amount of attention. Sure. You always think of your directors, you think of your composers, you think of your specific producers, all that fun stuff, writers, but very rarely do you get to kind of have an insight into some of the stuff that makes that possible, that's not as Jimmy Kimmel presenting it sexy at the Oscars or whatnot. Right. So yeah, no, it's super awesome to have the insight, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, dude, of course. And I appreciate you guys both reaching out. I remember, like Zach mentioning, you guys were kind of working on something like this, and I was like, oh, like I'm kind of in the game side, but I didn't know exactly what all you guys were talking about. But yeah, I mean,
we'll talk about anything. We've done Star Wars reviews by accident.
Of course.
Well, yeah, thanks for hopping on, Alex.
Of course.
And yeah, no, if we have anything else that's relevant, we'll make sure to bring you on. If we, games industry is always coming up with new things to either be a controversy or make new technical headways on. So if anything exciting happens that's related to your side, we might be.
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to have you back.
Sure.
Well, everybody, I hope that you all found that as informative as we did. And I just wanted to say another quick thanks to Alex for coming onto the show. It's definitely not the kind of topic that we normally cover, in the sense that it doesn't have anything necessarily directly to do with game development, but as Aaron had mentioned in the beginning, I think it's kind of an important thing to understand, multiple facets of the games industry. So if you want to go into music licensing, that's an option for you. So again, thanks, Alex. We really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about this topic.
Yeah, listening back through the episode, I 100%, I think, thanked like 15 times, but I'll go ahead and do one more. Really do appreciate you coming on the show, Alex, and I'm sure that the listeners will show you some love, dare I hope. But I think if we're on the topic of thanks, might not be a bad idea to thank Beach Girl, I think, because they gave us our music. It's good stuff. You can find their original tunes on Spotify, Bandcamp, SoundCloud, any place where fine digital music can be procured. And once again, that is Beach Girl. Check them out. You will not regret it.
And I would like to thank Dougie Art, who did our magical, wonderful, fantastical artwork for
now
our
you're just describing
podcast.
Dougie Art.
Yeah, I mean, also that as a person. But Dougie Art's great. We love working with her. If you want to support Dougie Art as an artist, you can find her under the same name, Dougie Art, on Etsy or on Instagram. So make sure to show some love and check her stuff out. And I think with that, unfortunately, it is time for us to leave you all. I know, don't cry. It is devastating saying goodbye. But do not think of it as a goodbye. Think of it as I just butchered it. It's like, don't be sad that it's ending. Be happy that it happened or whatever.
What is this?
I don't know. It was inspirational. But this is Zach signing off for this magical episode.
And remember, you want one more litter box than you have cats. My name is Aaron, as always. Goodbye! It's the boy with the tree and my gun in too small.